Today is Monday, August 25, 2014, the 237th day of the year. There are 128 days remaining until the end of 2014. On this day in 1609, Galileo Galilei demonstrates his first telescope to Venetian lawmakers. He studies the phases of Venus, discovers, names, and studies the four largest moons of Jupiter. He calls them Io, Callisto, Ganymede, and Europa. In the pagan Roman religion, the lovers of Jove, the Roman name for Zeus, the Greek king of the gods. Galileo, brighter than the average Venetian, is a physician, a mathematician, an engineer, a philosopher, an astronomer. He's busy most of the time, but, organized. He becomes known as the father of science, the father of modern physics, the father of modern science, father of modern observational astronomy. He's a modern character. This is, 400 years ago. Also, he has three lesser, merely human children as well, 2 girls and a boy, but since he's so busy arguing about Copernican heliocentrism, he doesn't have time to marry the mother of these children, the young and lusty Marina di Andrea Gamba. Consequently, the 2 girls, Virginia and Livia, good Catholics and on their birth records daughters of fornication that they are no good for marriage, not in Venice, so Virginia becomes Sister Maria Celeste. Livia becomes Sister Arcangela, and the boy, Vincenzo, he's later legitimated as a favorite of Galileo by the Big Cheese, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. A lot of paperwork. So Galileo, you can probably figure out, is already in a not especially favored light, fairly hot water with the church. Early 17th century, most Venetians take the Bible at its word about the earth being fixed on a foundation, unmoving as the center of the universe. Galileo builds a more powerful telescope, and upon witnessing the phases of Venus, figures out that the phases, like moon phases, are the result of being in a different position in an orbit around the sun. Galileo proposes that Earth, as other planets he studies, is actually also in orbit around the sun. A real goofball idea at the time, the rising and setting of the sun being an illusion created by the spinning of the planet on an invisible axis. Invisible. Right. He's mostly right about that, but his thinking isn't always bang on. For instance, he says the tides are the result of the sloshing around of water in the sea as a result of speeding up and slowing down of the Earth's rotation around the sun. That's just a little weird. And when the Roman Inquisition gets a load of his writing about heliocentrism, they accuse Galileo of heresy against God, the Church, and the Council of Trent. Eventually, even the Pope is compelled to weigh in on the matter, and ultimately Galileo is pretty much ordered to stop saying the Earth is not the center of the universe. His books, including all the books he's written up to then and any book he might possibly write in the future, are banned, and he's sentenced to spend the rest of his life under house arrest. Can't even go out to a movie show or slip around the corner for a slice of pizza. A legend about him goes, Galileo's condemned by the church, ordered to recant, to apologize for egregiously offending those guys, Jesus, the saints, that whole crowd. So, of course, he does so. He says he's all full of sorrow for being such a heretic and all. And then he mutters, out the side of his mouth, but still, it moves. Meaning Earth around the sun, which the Bible says is immovable on its heavenly foundation. So he's rebellious, like all the way up into the end. And even beyond the end, almost 100 years later, in 1737, during a more reasonable age, they move his remains to a more exalted resting place. And who knows why, they take 3 of his fingers and a tooth. Souvenirs? It's a mystery. But the one finger, his middle finger from his right hand, they display as an exhibit. That middle finger raised for all time in the Museo Galileo in Florence. No one knows what happened to the tooth. By way of historical perspective, also in 1609, when Galileo shows off his first telescope, in January, the Basque witch trials begin in earnest under the auspices of the Spanish Inquisition. By the time they've had enough, 7,000 cases are investigated. Europe's in a panic about witches who are essentially pagans, herbalists really, who like nothing more than a steaming cup of spearmint and chamomile tea with maybe a little honey in there, who are believed to have the ability to turn themselves into cats. Who can't do that? Persecution of witches is a change of pace for the Inquisition, which mostly busies itself persecuting Jews and Muslims who are forced by circumstances to finally find something they agree about. During the witch panic begun in 1609, at least 12 women are burned to death at the stake, 7 really, taking into account that 5 of those ladies are already dead from the torture inflicted to extract a confession out of them. On April 4, 1609, the English explorer Henry Hudson set sail from Amsterdam in the half moon. They're still trying to sail west through America to get to China. Hudson sails into New York Harbor instead in September 1609, then up the Hudson River as far as Albany, which of course isn't there yet. Hudson and his crew lay up in present-day Hudson, New York. to make some repairs to the Half Moon, lay in water supplies, hunt wild game. Shakespeare is still alive and still has another 7 years left in him. The first edition of his sonnets is published on May 20, 1609. It's unknown whether he even knew the book was in the works or whether he got paid for it. In August 1609, 7 ships arrive at the English colony in Jamestown, Virginia, with as many as 300 fresh colonists. In October 1609, a version of the soon-to-be-popular nursery rhyme Three Blind Mice is published in London by the then teenage musician Thomas Ravenscroft in the Deuteromalia, a collection of his musical works. It's been speculated that the rhyme alludes to the execution of 3 Anglican bishops, Hugh Latimer, Nicholas Ridley, and Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, under the order of the Catholic Queen Mary I of England, the so-called Oxford Martyrs, tried for heresy, burned to death at the stake in 1555. Although not literally blind, perhaps historians ascribe the bishop's lack of vision to an inability to perceive the one true faith. Nowadays, pretty much all around the world, plenty of folks seem to have the same problem. From Rutland, Vermont, this is Richard Alcott speaking.